Hi guys, and welcome back. Our last debate for today is how are leaders effectively scaling their business through buyer enablement strategies? I would like to welcome to the group as our speakers, George Brontén, the CEO of Membrain, Jan-Niklas Frantz, the head of buyer enablement from Enablement, Ineke Boer, managing partner from Blinc, Waltraud Glaeser, the founder of VUCA World, and I believe Arthur Jones is coming back, the CEO of the Art of Standing Out. I think he's having some technical problems. Okay, guys, thank you for taking the time to be with us today. So we would like the topic of today's how are leaders effectively scaling their business through buyer enablement strategies? I would like to just pose this question to the group before we get off and start kicking into the debate, just to get everybody's opinion. Should we start with ladies first?
No, we know this. We need transformation. We need transformation. Start with the men first, Leon, huh?
Well, all right then. Go in, George. Kick us off.
Well, thank you. Yeah, well, what is buying enablement, I guess, is one question people might ask themselves. I think for me, selling is about helping. So selling is really about enabling buyers, and that should always have been about that. So I don't really think there is anything new with buyer enablement strategies from my perspective, apart from maybe the tools we use to achieve that. So that's kind of my initial thoughts on the topic.
Okay. Jan?
Yeah, sure. Hi, everyone. Looking forward to the debate. Yeah, I mean, I can only agree with George. I guess basically nothing has changed, right? The way we are doing sales should be always about the buyer, about the person we speak to, and actually take a very consultative approach also to sales. So in that regard, I guess nothing has changed, but still, I guess maybe at some point of time over the past few years, we forgot about that. Yeah. So we need to remind ourselves that it's not about us, but about the buyer.
Okay. Thank you. Ineke?
I do see quite a lot of change, actually. So if I look at buyer enablement, I already love the term. Like 3 years ago in Belgium, at least, we talked about sales enablement, right? And now at least we're talking about buyer enablement, which is already a good transformation, I would say. And like that transformation is already ongoing for a while. Instead of looking from the inside of your company to the outside, you turn it the other way around, right? The outside in view, looking at your customers, and your customers are in the lead of your value proposition, your messaging, and so forth. But I entirely follow you, George, that it's all about helping customers. However, like we have to continuously invest in order to do so, because especially like given the crisis that will hit us and is already hitting us, let's face it. The buyer and customer retention specifically will become even more important. Hence, it's a normal reaction to all of a sudden focus on the inside, cost cutting, that kind of elements. Whereas ultimately the solution of surviving the crisis, so to say, lies on the outside, our customers. So that's how I look at buyer enablement.
Okay. Waltraud, what's your perspective on this?
Yes, I think buyers enablement is much more about giving them the context competency, really teaching them context competency, because I mean, what is their role? What is their responsibility? They have to buy stuff which makes the own company, which makes the own market even more successful. And so what is success today in a VUCA world is always, it's changing, it's volatile. And I think it's really much about understanding the context. And if you once understood the context and maybe you found a good reason why you should do things or why you should change things, for example, also it's about change. I think there is a lot of change going on as well as transformation. So the buyer's enablement, from my point of view, is very much getting into a discourse with them and really making clear, assured that they understood the context they are in and which responsibility they have within their roles then.
Okay, brilliant. We're just going to introduce Arthur Jones, CEO of After Standing Out. Come back in. So Arthur, you haven't missed much. I was just asking everybody, what is their opinions in regards to the question, how are leaders effectively scaling their business through buyer enablement strategies? You're the last person, so if you could please just give us your quick summary of that question and answer.
The sales enablement providers selling what?
No, sorry. No, how are leaders effectively scaling their business through buyer enablement strategies?
I think that a lot of them are not, and maybe that's part of the problem. I think that there's a shift in the focus from helping sellers to just sell, to guiding sellers to help buyers buy. Mm-hmm. And I think that that's a shift. I mean, selling is great, and I've done it for a long time, but helping buyers buy is more of a collaborative effort, where the buyer actually feels like they've been part of the creation process. I go back to something that predates my days in the field. A long time ago, IBM was selling the first computers, and those computers would go into the CEO, and the CEO said, "Oh my gosh, I've got to get this new thing. It's amazing." They would pay $1 million and the computer would be installed and they would fail because the users in the cubicles that really made the company go said, "I'm not using that thing." IBM said, "Okay, we've got to change our tactic." And they started doing a thing they called JAD. And I think this is from the 1950s when the first computers were sold, but I think it's still relevant today. That when you go in and you do JAD, which is a joint application development, and the people that are actually going to use the product are engaged with the salesperson, and the salesperson says, "So tell me, we've got this great new technology, but I'd like to know how you would use it." And now that person feels like part of the solution. They feel like they've had their input and they've co-created the new value that the company is going to embrace. They're part of the new way forward. It's just not parachuted in and told to use it. And I think that is something IBM did 70 years ago, and we still struggle with doing that with our buyers today.
Okay. I mean, I think that's very interesting. I mean, just from the 5 or so people we got here, I mean, we've had quite a range of different answers here. I mean, I think this is quite interesting here. So we're saying some of it is about to teach, some of it is about, it's the same, just we're looking at different tools. We had Arthur saying that basically it's not really, we're not really practicing buyer enablement. We're basically just trying to encourage the buyers to buy more, so it's almost a kind of a facade. And then we've had Ineke saying that yes, okay, there is a transformation here, there is a change here that we're really and we should be encouraging this and developing this more. I mean, let's look at some of the tools that we've got available in the market. I think when we talk about buyer enablement, I think most people think tools. I mean, am I right in thinking that, or there's different strategies or different perspectives? I mean, I think the two ladies here, I mean,
isn't it more process than tool?
They're definitely shaking their head, and Waltraud definitely said teaching. So
I would say customer journey first, right? Because the buyer journey is like setting the stage for the customer experience that follows like post the buying event, I would say. Yeah, less about tools. Like tools never have value. It's what you do with the tool that has value ultimately.
Yeah, I agree with Ineke. I think it's a process, not a tool, and a process has a lot of touch points. I mean, yeah.
And the saying, a fool with a tool is still a fool. So That's from the agile environment. So I think a tool is very helpful as long as it's really creating value, as long as it's really, for example, giving some release to a person and maybe allowing him or her to get more time for things that really create value, or to be much more motivated, for example, to talk to people, because sales still, what Ineke already said, it's a business between two people, two persons. Yeah. So at least you have to consider that, and sales is much about empathy. And for example, how can I create empathy by a tool? I mean, maybe there is artificial intelligence or things like that, but still, I think people are buying people, as we say. Yeah, a person is buying a person and a solution. So as long as the solution could be consisting with tools, and a tool will support the solution, then it's fine about tools. But that's, I think, really a one-way road. If we think anything that can be automated should be automated, but still there will be left a little part of it which is not about tools.
Do we still agree with that statement that people buying people? I mean, let me. I'm playing devil's advocate here. I mean, guys, please bear with me here on this one.
My message.
No, because I remember when I started selling, this was going back long, many moons ago, so probably 20 25 years or so ago. Now, when I was an SDR, I was very, very successful, but the reason why I was very successful was because I used to map out all of the various different stakeholders, and I'd engage with the various different stakeholders before approaching the main decision maker. So by the time I'd approached the main decision maker and presented my solution and presented my case, I'd already gained buy-in from 3 or 4 different stakeholders along in the sales process. So I knew that there was a very good chance that this opportunity was going to get progressed through the sales process. Now, the buyer's process has become so much more complex. And I think it's very, very challenging for the sales guy to really map out that complexity and be able to build these relationships all the way along with all these various different stakeholders. So going back to my question, is it still that we are buying people from people? We are buying, or is it just that the salesperson is just one piece in a long complex process?
Three pieces. I think there are 3 pieces. Like, you have to work on the intersection of process, tools, and people. And the one cannot live without the other. Like, you can have a freaking solid process, but with no skilled employees, and you'll fail. And same with tools. Like to jump on what we previously said, the amount of sales enablement tools that I see out there with very low adoption rates, like even embarrassing adoption rates, then I'm saying, like, it's not the tool, it's the intersection of tool, process, people. And that is, like, if you focus on that intersection and balance the 3 out, then I believe you're working on buyer enablement. So it's not people buy from people. People buy from well-equipped people with process and tools, I would say.
Okay.
I'd like to...
We're working, for example, with a bank in Belgium, and like, they don't have tools, rough cuts. They have very sales enablement tools, and that's also the reflection of their customers. That's their customers are saying, well, you're a very good person, you're a very good private banker, but ultimately, like, we're in a digital world, and you cannot even show me in a decent version what you'll be doing with me, right? So it's truly that intersection. The one cannot live without the other 2.
Go on, George.
Yeah, and I think what you said, Leon, is interesting, because we need to realize the customer is the people at the customer that we're selling to are working in a system, right? And this is what makes complex selling difficult, because it's not one person who can make a decision. It's multiple people who need to realize and understand that they have a problem they need to fix, and then come up with a possible solution, and maybe a vendor. And maybe it's not even a vendor involved at the end. Maybe they will solve their problems without you. But you came in and sort of helped them find out what problems they have. And I think we are selling humans to humans because that's how we build trust, right? If you are credible, reliable, and you can have a really intimate discussion with them, like the trust equation, I think was mentioned earlier in this in another session, then I can understand that, wow, Leon really gets this. He understands selling. He can train our people because we need to grow the company. So our problem is that we're not growing enough. We believe that the solution is to train the people, and we'll hire Leon because he seems knowledgeable and really trustworthy. So I think we're buying from people, but we are misunderstanding or undervaluing the system, which is why your approach was so smart, right? Because you understood that if I just go to the decision maker and he asked his or her people, and they cross their arms and say, hey, we don't need any training, you're not going to have a project. But if they are already in alignment with the problem, they will say, yeah, that sounds like a good idea, and you will get your business. So I think understanding that everyone is in a system and that we are not, I mean, every time you make a change to the system, people will reject it unless everyone is in alignment. Mm-hmm. So I always think about this as trust, align, grow. First, you need to create the trust. Then you need to find the alignment, and then you can grow. But if you don't have the trust and you don't have alignment, there will be no sale or growth together.
I think that's a very good point.
I think,
go on, Arthur. Sorry.
I just want to build on, I think we're all saying the same thing in many ways, but I think that it's Leon, your example really was demonstrative of what leadership is. You weren't selling in that environment. You were leading that customer to understand that you had authority in this, with the problem that they were trying to solve. That's why they kept talking to you. You demonstrated authority. You gained their respect with your authority as a leader in that conversation. And when you got their respect, they gave you their trust in shepherding you into the office of the economic buyer to have the conversation to say, I've talked to 14 people and they all agree that here's your problem, and here's how they see our solution benefiting you. You had authority, you gained respect, you got trust. And that goes to what George was saying. That's alignment. If you don't have those three things aligned, establishing your authority, building trust to gain their respect so they know if they spend $200,000 with you, it's going to be spent wisely. Because I used to think that know, like, and trust was important. Trust is only that you protect their spend so they spend it wisely. And your leadership is the value that they're betting on. They're placing a bet on your leadership skill and your authority about the technology you represent. And I think that is, I mean, there's a Gartner metric that says 43% of B2B buyers desire a seller-free sales experience, a preference that increases 54% for millennial buyers. They want the buyer-free experience anymore. But the real metric, customers who prefer a seller-free buying experience have a 23% higher purchase regret or failure rate.
Yeah.
So the value of selling is still very high, and it's a human endeavor. But if you make that engagement, that relationship building, that conversation with the leaders that you engage, the 14 touch points you might have, and you don't really, if you have not cultivated a brand and built your authority as a leader, then you can't carry that ball through that 14 steps and win in the end, because it begins with us as we enter that conversation, and a mindset and behaviors to follow the process of achieving alignment to get the sale.
Yeah. Jan, go on. You had a comment. Go on, sir.
Yeah, I mean, a lot of very interesting thoughts already. I think in general, even though we all shed light on it from a different perspective, from what I've heard, I mean, in the end, by enablement, it's basically, I think it's a way of selling. Yeah, no matter how you want to see it, whether it's tools, processes, people. So that's what I mean with way of selling. Yeah, it's always a combination of different things. So in that regard, as we've been taught also how to do sales, yeah, it's about authority. It's about the value of sellers is very high in helping people to make right decisions. I think in that regard has nothing changed. We've also been talking about tools. I think the problem that we is, and there I want to draw on the point that George mentioned, the buyer is part of a system, right? It's a complex system, and the buying process is also very complex. The problem is that we as salespeople, we draw linear processes. We oversimplify the reality. And what happens from there is we basically follow linear processes, whereas the reality, the buyer's journey, the buyer's process is not linear at all. And I think this is where we as sellers also might lose throughout the process credibility, authority, because we are not acting buyer-centric. And this is also, and as a result, what we can see is what Arthur just mentioned, studies from Gartner where people actually say, I don't want to talk to salespeople anymore. So I think for us is back to the basics, make it about the other person, and let's stop thinking in too simple and linear processes that do not match the buyer's needs and his actual reality within the system he's in.
Well, we're going to touch back on that point in a minute, but before I do, let what Waltraud say. Let Waltraud speak.
Leon, thanks. I'm dealing with the VUCA world, which is volatile, uncertain, complex, and big. And complexity, Leon, was definitely the answer 2 years ago when I asked my customers, okay, what is the main aspect of these four VUCA phenomena which really strikes you? And then they said it's a complexity. It has dramatically changed to uncertainty and volatility. So it's a good answer that we have this. Luckily, it's only VUCA, this positive VUCA, positive prime by Bob Johansson, which has vision, understanding, clarity, agility, and adaptability. I think that's about really an idea we have to think about. What do people need? And George, I fully agree with you. What do systems need? What do we have to understand about people, about the human being, about the needs, very human needs? What do we have to understand about a system? How can a system support people and vice versa? And what is really, you were really quick, and I really appreciate, George, that you mentioned the word trust. It's really a bit about trust. It's about certainty. And I think both can be served by people as well as by tools. And it's really, I think we have to address different questions now in these times. It's not about, is it the right system? Is it the wrong system? What is right? What is wrong? Because in the VUCA world, we say it's as well as, it depends. So because we also have this, both worlds. We have the old world, we have the new world, we have transition. So how to deal with transition? And I think this is another discourse we should really have. And at least it's, for me, the question would really be, what should be different after we took any initiative, after we talked to our customers, after we enabled our buyers? So what should be the impact? What should be the result? And maybe some of you might know the, the Golden Circle by Simon Sinek. He's saying start with why. I mean, not necessarily. I think you have to start with why, but don't start with how. Because it's the why, the how, and the what. The what is what should be different afterwards, what should be the results, and all what I just mentioned. So I think we should really have this kind of discussion, and then really involve, I mean, if we're talking about change management, it's about involving those who are concerned. So much more involving those stakeholders and even having different perspectives, because it's about also being co-creative, really about being collaborative. And then maybe even we here in our panel, even we don't have the right answers, as long as we don't know and have not yet understood what is it about, what should be the difference, where are the real pain points, and what was already tried and what might be new, what is changed, fixing the past, what could be transformation, creating future. It's really like a caterpillar and a butterfly. These are two different systems. So I think we really have to anticipate also these aspects, even if it might sound a bit theoretical at this point, but we really have to break it down to the practice of our customers.
And my comment to this was, and there's a couple of things that got said. So, Jan, I think you mentioned a really great point, and you said, let's get back to basics. But then you said, that the sales process is very complex, and it is. But I think those two statements are very contrary, because I think it wasn't always so. It wasn't always so complex. When I started, there wasn't full team, stakeholders involved in decision. There's probably about 5, and it's really, I've noticed it over the years. There is now probably about 14 or so, and I'm like, where have all these stakeholders come from? When I did it, it was only about 5. And somebody was on social media the other day to me and said to me, oh yeah, look, Leon, what do you think of this new buyer enablement process? They did some tool and stuff like that. And I was like, listen, for me, sellers, we have created this problem because people, we're not training our staff properly. We're not doing, as I said, when I started sales, we think of pre-sales, sales, and after sales. So we had one person, and they were the account manager. Regardless, yes, I had a technical support person, I had this kind of person, all that supported me, but I was still the account manager responsible for that account. And I held my team, the people who were around me, accountable to make sure that they did what they said they were going to do, and that there was just trust in that account and that relationship. Now you've got so many different stakeholders, both from the buyers and the sellers side, that's why I was saying that this trust and this relationship is broken because it's such a short engagement. So for my result was buyer enablement. You want my solution how to build buyer enablement? Bring back the account manager. Bring back the key account manager, the CAM. Yeah. Bring that back in. He's the day one. He's the central point of the contact. What are your guys' thoughts on that?
And I just want to excuse me. This is, we have these agile frameworks. It's about principles. And why do companies really decide on working iteratively? Because they want much more involve the customer. I mean, who's paying for that? Why do we do that? Yeah, so at least walk in your customer's shoes. Who's paying my salary? All the things we know already from our selling or sales careers. I had the same years way back when. So, and this is exactly when it comes to adaptability and agility. Then it means have the right stakeholders on board, have them involved, and then maybe go iteratively from one step to the next, because maybe when you just negotiate a product right now and you sell it 6 weeks later, maybe there was a big change in between. So how can we, what you are just mentioning is about accountability, it's about responsibility, who is really taking responsibility for what, and it's just what I wanted to add, that especially if you change the way of working, yeah, maybe this could also be a part of finding better solutions and having a bit more adaptability to this complex world. It's still complex, but we have to differentiate from complicated things, definitely. But this is just an idea I have. Ineke, sorry, I was a bit quicker.
No worries. Thanks, but I appreciate your comment, Waltraud. I think, to jump on what Leon said, indeed, in the latest survey of Gartner in B2B sales process, for 6 to 10 stakeholders are involved. That's what's published recently. Mm-hmm. And what I also experienced without statistics is that on the seller side, inside, you also have the pre-sales technical expert, an account executive, an SDR, professional services team, a bunch of people out there. And sometimes it looks as simple as align the roles of everyone within the process, the added value of everyone within the process, and focus on having a single point of contact for the customer as a whole. That kind of manages this complexity a bit. And that is, to bring me back to the process tools and people, that is really a human skill, right? To align people and to co-create solutions together. It's less about process or tools, I would say.
Okay. Jan, you had something to say?
Yeah, super interesting points. I mean, when you said, Ineke, you were just mentioning it, 6 to 10 stakeholders involved in the sales process, and then that's the external side, and then also on the internal side, we have a lot of people being involved. I think this makes it complex. That makes selling complex, but that also makes buying complex. And I think we should simply accept it, that it's complex, and we should stop simplifying it, but accept that complexity. And I think a very important point is, Ineke, where you said maybe it's that one person as a single point of contact who can manage that. I think this is exactly, and I'm very careful with that, where also a solution, a tool could help. Why? Because when it also comes to co-creation, like we know it from the agile environment, Waltraud, like you said, I think we need to start thinking in collaborative spaces, in frameworks that we create for buyer-seller interaction, and not in processes. And I think this can be a person who creates that framework, this environment where different people can come together, they can interact, they can align. But it can be maybe at some point of time, it depends on the product, on your deal sizes, on your selling motion. But maybe this collaborative space can be also a tool, a platform.
It can support that single point of contact, such a collaboration space. Yeah, and I've seen that work. Like it's a second memory of the group of people that I just mentioned.
So George, go on. You had a point to say. So.
Yeah, and I think we're talking about this pretty generically, and I think we need to also know that it's going to be different depending on what the listener is selling, right? Because buying can be extremely complex, but it can also be quite simple. So I guess what we are talking about now is a lot, the more complex B2B sales with all the different stakeholders where there is co-creation. But there are also sellers selling products where that is not necessary. So I just wanted to make that point. And also there's a difference if you're selling to a new client or if you're growing with an existing one. But I wanted to bring back the point of the seller. And I think what has maybe been forgotten a bit with all the focus on tools and technology is the conversation. I mean, if you are a very skilled salesperson, you should be able to have a very valuable conversation with your buyers that opens up their minds to see the potential outcomes they could achieve and the problems they have and get them into alignment about that. But I think in selling, we are making so many assumptions that people ought to have a need to buy whatever I'm selling, right? So we jump very quickly into the solution part and the what, without spending enough time on the why and the how, maybe. And I think buyers are making the same mistake because they are, just pounded by so many marketing messages every day, and they think, oh my God, I need to buy this technology, and I'm going to grow like crazy, without really spending quality time in defining what problems do they really have and what outcomes do they really need. Like we have people come to us that don't know their win rate, and they don't know which win rate they would like to have, and we help them with sales effectiveness. I mean, that's a problem, right? Why should they even go out and find a trainer or a technology if they don't even know what they want, right? So I think having a really valuable
conversation that really requires soft skills. Mm-hmm. So and soft skills that, in my opinion, only a human can have. It's about having connection, building connection, and talking adapted towards who is in front of you.
But I think this is very, very much leads on to a debate we had earlier this morning, is that, we saw a report from Gartner where we're saying it's that less than 17% of actual buyers are actually engaging with sellers. They don't want to engage with sellers. Like, I think Jan mentioned it, they don't want to engage with sellers anymore. And it's not, and again, I think, a part of it may be that they feel that they have their own comment, they have their own, they got the loads of content and they can, make this decision themselves. I think part of it is that, but I think part of it is also that there is, so much, for lack of a better word, untrained sales people out there who are not doing their job properly, who are just trying to push a solution. I remember speaking to one sales guy the other day, and he asked me, "What's your problems?" And we asked the questions, and like, "What's your problems?" And I said, "Oh, these my problems." He sent me an email back and said, "Right, yeah, you mentioned this, and this." And I said, "No, I didn't. I didn't say anything like that." But he was trying to push me, pigeonholing me so that he could sell his solution. I was like, okay.
I think one big problem is badly educated or taught salespeople. Yeah. So buyers make bad experiences with sellers.
And isn't that the point? Isn't that the point? I mean, what are sellers taught? I mean, they are taught to sell. Are they taught to understand? And this is what I want to stress again, George. You mentioned it, and I think we have the same kind of approach. I think it's really much. I still stick to it's about impact from the perspective of the buyer, or the buyer in accountability towards his company, his system, his or her internal customer. Okay, so the impact should really be to understand what is it about and what is it not, because we're always asking, okay, what should it be? What should it be? I very often start, what should it be not? What to get rid of? What to really, and Jan, this refers to what you said, how can we take out a bit of complexity? We cannot reduce complexity because it is complex. And we have to anticipate that. But if we can really be helpful to understand, and either, and also not just we as maybe sellers understand what do the customer really needs and how does it differ from what he wants, because I think there's a big difference sometimes what they want and what they really need. And how could I be helpful, for example, as a coach, to help to really train understanding? Because what I look at the comments from Marcus, for example, yes, they are thinking in the short term, and they are pushed to go forward. They even don't have any time to stop and relax and reflect, for example, and get context competency. So what they are doing is they are reactive. They are not responsive. And I think there is also a big difference. If we really could help them to understand their own business, their own responsibility, accountability, their own solutions to their system, because maybe they are much more adaptable than we could be as an external partner or a stakeholder. I think this should be a duty of us, and this should be the approach and the mindset. And even if I couldn't sell him any of my products, still, I could sell him my interest, my empathy, my personality, and this definitely will maybe pay back, not just right now, but maybe somewhere later, or maybe he will recommend me and my services. So I think there's always something in for me, but I should not have this product selling and I know your solution before I haven't understood properly, okay, what is it about? And as I said, VUCA, the U is also for understanding and the C is for clarity. So gaining clarity and helping to get into clarity, I think this should really be one of our main drivers also as well.
So I think there's two main points that's coming out here, which we're kind of leading towards, and I want to see if we can wrap these up and sum these up for our audience. So the 2 points is, one, sellers are not being trained properly and are being pushed and driven. They've been pushed to hit targets and not really deliver value or build those relationships with their customers. So one is, how can we change that? The second part is that from the buyer's perspective, buyers, they've had this, maybe a burn victim, they've had this bad relationship and they don't want to speak to sellers. But how can we educate them that there is a value in this process? And these are the two train of thoughts that I wanted to continue and see if we can do something with that. What would your guys' suggestions be on that, George?
Well, I think it's up to you as the selling company to prove that value, right? You have to be the value as the seller, and if you have had, as a buyer, a bunch of poor experiences, then of course your assumption is, why would I want to speak to a seller? They just want to show up and throw up and pitch their stuff, and I'm not interested in that. So I get that. But so you need to come with the knowledge and skills of your ideal customer profile and show up with a lot of knowledge and relevance and be that authority as Arthur was talking about earlier, and provide insights, provide something new and interesting, and show social proof you've done this before. You're an expert in your field, and help them think differently about their problems. Because online, everything looks the same to buyers. It's hard to be a buyer today because everything looks exactly the same. Everyone's making the same sort of promises. So I think if you just zoom out a bit from the seller or the sales team, I think companies are also struggling with positioning themselves, right? Because when everything sounds the same and you jump in and sound exactly the same, why would they want to talk to you? You made the same promise as everyone else did. So when you reach out, you need to be different in some way, because we still have croc brains, right? If it sounds the same, I'm not going to want to talk to you. If it sounds like you have something different and interesting, I will talk to you. So you have to bring the value.
Okay.
Bring the value.
I would actually like to. I would like to jump in here, because there was also a great, in regards to what you just said, George, a comment from Sierra I saw here. I think, Sierra, it's like you have to earn that conversation. So I think, it's nice to see, because what we are talking about, the role of the seller, what he should do, what his role is within that sales process, it's pretty much back to the basics, right? At least how we've been taught sales. And I think maybe the role of the seller is just moving down a little bit if we want to think of it as a funnel, because in the earlier stages, you need more time to earn that conversation. You need to gain that credibility actually before talking to someone. And I guess that's the job then of marketing, of the company as in general. But it's, for us, it will be still important to get that conversation as a seller, because then we can provide the value, and make people also aware of what they really need.
So does the credibility come from the brand?
Earn that.
Does the credibility come from the brand then, or does it come from the person? Because you said sorry, I'm talking because you said.
Can I jump in there, Leon? I think it comes from the person carrying the bag. I mean,
I said the brand. Sorry, not the bag. Sorry.
No, well, I
think
the brand is the company, and the person carrying the bag is the salesperson. And the salesperson entering the conversation without authority doesn't get in my door, right? I mean, why would I talk to that person? And I think, sales, I have to redefine my thinking around sales enablement. And I think it's preparing sellers to be integrated inside the buyer's multi-threaded experience. And that's what you described about that 14 touch points, Leon, that you had in that deal that you did. And I remember from my early days of my sales career, I was told, no one ever buys from you, Arthur, because you found their implied need. The implication is, I sell watches, they need watches, right? Explicit need is what they really, really need. And sometimes they don't know. Because they, in a systems thinking kind of construct, they have a mental model about the problem. We as a consultant arrive, and we, with clear eyes, perhaps see it differently. And then our job is to say, I see what you see, but I see this other thing. And what do you think of that? It's a conversation to move away from the mental model and the perceptions and the structures of behavior in that organization that are baked into creating the problem. Because if you think about the systems, as VUCA world would say, the forces working on that client, if you can deconstruct the forces and show them those forces with a new perspective, they might realize that your problem helps resolve the forces at work in their business. But you have to move away from the implication to work with the explicit things happening that sometimes their mental model prevents them from even seeing. You don't get to have that conversation, in that multi-threaded conversation, without coming with a high level of authority as the brand called Arthur representing that company. So it's the company's brand and my brand together, which gains entree to even explore unpacking implication versus explicit mental model and perception that they have wrongly created in their organization. And because you work with 50 organizations just like theirs and resolve problems like the one they have, you can enter the conversation and say, you know what? Let me tell you a story about 3 other companies that I worked with in the last year that had a problem similar to yours. And here's how they changed. And they go, oh my gosh, that's the same problem that we have. And they changed. Well, what did they do differently? Well, they saw it differently. They saw X over here. You know what I'm saying? I mean, so it's if we have to get inside the multi-threaded experience that they have and then unpack the mental model and perception that they have that might be wrong. We can't always believe that the customer is always right in the way that they organize their business.
I totally agree with you, but I think that obviously there's a big emphasis there on, from what I'm hearing, is on the seller to actually do their research and do all that stuff. But what about if the leaders are not empowering them to do that and not actually giving them the space to do that? How is we as leaders going to change? What should we do differently to enable our sellers to do that?
What I just described is leaders empowering salespeople to be leaders and to be servant leaders in that regard, and that they go into the business not just to sell the product, but to fix a problem. And if they're fixing a problem, they got to first uncover what the implication is that the customer thinks what the problem is, to get to the explicit problem together. And that's where the collaboration happens with that client. And if the leaders empower the sellers to act like leaders and go in to build, before they even enter the business, to build their authority so they can gain entree to the business. And then they lead with the knowledge that they have from all the other businesses, because all the ICPs are the same, aren't they? If you're doing right. And so I come with the experience of having served in the 5 years I've been in this industry, businesses just like yours. Mm-hmm. And I've seen this problem before. And let me tell you how they've unpacked and changed and achieved the goals that they set out for themselves. So you can't do that if you don't have the chops of a leader. And if your leader doesn't empower you, the salesperson, to behave as a leader and trains you how. And I'll add one more thing. It's not just being a leader. And I think Ineke said it. It's being human. And I think in that conversation, you're being a leader, but you're being a leader coach.
Exactly.
Because you don't want to tell them that you've seen it before and I know how to fix this. You say, here's how I've seen people work through these challenges. How would you do it? And you're coaching in that moment to let them arrive at the answer themselves, but you know what questions to ask to open the door to the answer that they need to arrive at. Then it's collaboration and co-creation in that. So leadership, coaching, and patience is often what's required, but you can't do any of that if you don't enter the conversation.
Let's have somebody else have a chat wants to speak.
There you go.
If I can jump into that, what I see leaders struggling with is to balance quantity and quality, like managing their sales team based upon quantity, activity-based selling, and so forth, and quality. And that's a bit the needs analysis and pinpointing the root of the problem that the customer is having. And finding that balance is tough, especially younger leaders with less maturity. It's very easy to manage on a quantity or an activity basis. But if all leaders would do that, then ultimately a salesperson will no longer have a place in the buyer journey, so to say.
Hang on, is quantity a factor here, guys? I think
it's management and leadership, Leon. I think what came up to my mind, I think we really anticipate both management and leadership. And I think, Ineke, this goes a bit to your direction, that you are talking a bit more about learning selling management instead of becoming maybe a sales leader. So to really understand your tools and really understand your role, and what do you get paid for at the end of a month, and what are maybe your bonuses, your incentives. This is very often I think, related to quantity, and I think this is in the sense of Ineke. And I would, if we talk about leadership, then I would really differentiate it from maybe the management part of it. Both is necessary, but I think really how can this be put together more and be one cannot stand without the other, because you need quality and quantity. I think both is relative and relevant. Still, I think, Leon, the question is how it's again not linear, and it's again not proportional. So it's really, when do it needs more quantity and when more quality, for example.
Go on, Jan. What did you want to say, sir?
Yeah, I just wanted to say, I think for us as leaders, it's really just I think also about getting people to have the right mindset, help them understanding how good selling looks like. So, for example, I ask my people sometimes when we talk about deals, it's just like, okay, what would you do if you knew that he already bought the solution? What would you do now? So this really helps them to take this like enablement perspective, buyer enablement perspective. Yeah, what would you do if you would be already a customer? What would you do? What would you be doing in the next conversation? How would you help him? What would you propose? What would you suggest? And I think it's our job as leaders to really change the way also from salespeople that we are hiring, how we think about sales, the way of doing sales, and make it about the other person. And let's detach us from the outcomes, right? It's also very basic. Have good conversations, be consultative, and detach from the outcomes, because it's not always it's outside of your area of control. Control what you can do and leave the rest out of it.
Go on, George. Go on.
Those were great points there, I think. And back to what Arthur said, I really liked you bringing up coaching, because if you look at what complex B2B sales really is, for me, it's change management, right? It's about going back to the system. You're adding something to their system that will change it, and that will meet resistance, right? So how do you then coach everyone within that system to want to be a part of that change? And in order to do so we go back to the problem definition and the outcome definition, right? We need to know those two things, and everyone needs to be aligned and all of that good stuff. So I think coaching is good. And then I was thinking here as we were talking about technology and why everybody wants to buy the tool. And I think if you know the NLP model, or the logical levels of change, we think we can make changes at different levels, right? All the way down from the environment, which is probably the tools maybe, all the way up to our purpose in life or in the business, maybe if we're in a business environment. So it's much easier to change your environment, to buy a new headset, than to change your mindset or your beliefs and value system. And when you coach along these different levels. And the same thing when with a buyer, right? You can talk about the features and stuff. You're all the way down at the bottom of the pyramid. But unless that rhymes and really plays with where they're going, their purpose and their mission and their initiatives, you're not going to sell anything, right? So I love the idea of thinking about selling as coaching, because your managers need to coach your salespeople, just like Jan-Niklas is explaining that he does here. But the seller also needs to coach customers throughout.
Can I build on that? I just want to build on what George is saying, because I think it's an important point. And there's a thing, if I had known when I was in the field, the thing called the ladder of inference, which is something that coaches use. And imagine the ladder at the bottom is perception. The next step on the ladder is belief. And then the third step is action. And at the bottom of the ladder is a pond, a pool of water. Our perceptions and a belief in action, we build that construct. And the sales rep often has to go and unpack that and help the customer get a new perception of the system that they currently have and how it's changed with the additive of the product that you offer. You have to get them to walk down that ladder. And why are they going to walk down that ladder with you? From the action that they're currently taking to change their belief and perception, to step into the puddle of new ideas that you're offering, and then go back up that ladder to take action. So coaching is the mechanism that you get them to do that, because you're not telling them to do that. You're showing them why. You're asking open-ended questions in a different way, not to sell, but to coach them through this process of changing their point of view.
But yeah, and I think just to lead on from your point earlier, and I think this this kind of being a leader coach, and I think this is a really great point that you touched on, and I think everybody's kind of revolving around this same point here, is that what I'm seeing is that there is, because of all this complexity, because of the situation, this uncertainty that we're in as well, and that's been created by this hybrid selling and whatever, there is the need, the demand for this new evolution of salesperson is being called for, demanded for. That someone who's not a typical phone monkey, forget those people, those, I'm not saying cold calling is dead, no, but the typical phone monkey who's just sitting there reading a script and you got no idea about what they're selling and no idea who they're selling it to, that is dead. That cannot and should not continue. Yeah, and I think it shouldn't be, and this is where I came back to the point where I was talking to you about quantity and quality. I think there is a real need nowadays for guys, we need, managers, we think we need to move away from this quantity, this managing by these KPIs, and if you do 100 calls a day, you are going to, sales is a numbers game. Do 100 calls, you're going to lead to X amount of decision makers, lead to X amount of calls, and No, it's not necessarily that's true anymore. I understand the more you put in the top of the funnel, the more will come out the bottom, but I think that is really a kind of Neanderthal way of selling nowadays. And I think really we need to, pick the 1 or 2, 3, 4, I say to my guys, look, if you do 5 quality calls a day, I am happy. 5 quality calls a day. I don't need you doing any more than that. I'd rather you spend an hour researching and then do 1 call than try to hit 50 calls, to get deals. It's not, no.
I agree. The KPI that I really would like to add is the amount of one-on-one coaching sellers receive, or the amount of training on soft skills and leading that conversation that sellers receive. That would be a lovely KPI to manage.
Okay. Do we think that anybody could do this though? Is this a skill that can easily be taught? Because you can't, I don't believe leaders can be I believe you can train managers. I'm not sure that leaders can be just easily trained. Well,
Leon, it should not be, I think that's a wrong question. It should not be, is it easily to be trained or easily to adapt? And then I think what we had Marcus, and then he touched my point. What are the questions we really have to address in future? So do we still ask the right questions? And the question, for example, should not be the one, is it easy to adapt? Is it easy to teach someone? I think it's, again, the either or. There will be types that are really doing volume and they can have very, very hard KPIs. Yeah. And there are products in this world that they are sold by hard KPIs. But as well as we need also the other part of KPIs, and I just wrote it to the chat, soft in bracket, in hyphens, soft KPIs. And I'm 59 years old, yes, okay, and I know my brain will only stop learning if I didn't give it any food anymore, if I don't want to learn anymore. So as long as I'm willing to learn, I'm able to learn. Still, if I ask a fish to climb a tree, then most likely the fish will be a low performer. So ask a dog, or at least a cat, then you will get a better result. What I mean by that is, it's a question of interest. It's a question of what's in for me. Why should I be doing this? Can I really be part of the solution for my customer, or really add value to the whole system, to the whole process? I think these questions we really have to ask. And again, it's coming back to having a collaboration, having a mixed team, having cross-functional teams, and maybe really not substituting, but really adding and completing maybe processes and systems, and at least it's about motivation. If a person is motivated to become from a manager to a leader, then most likely there is something in for him or her, and some things will be possible. Even still, okay, let's look at the limit and don't overstress things, and really be relaxed and be a bit more authentic, because as long as you are not playing a role which you really like to play, the other part, especially in sales, will mention that or will notice that. So I think we have to look about what is KPI, what are reasonable KPIs in this VUCA world, what are the questions we should really address, how could we exchange discourses. So that's what I think.
What I was trying to get at is there a different type of profile that we should be looking for? I would say this, you see my name, Arthur Jones, and behind that, to lead is human. I think leadership is a human skill. Leadership is based upon EQ, which is self-awareness, knowing yourself, knowing your strengths, your values, knowing your weaknesses, and how to backfill those weaknesses with other people's skills. Self-regulation, being able to manage yourself, right? Overachieve obstacles, overcome obstacles. And most importantly, social awareness, knowing other people. If you know yourself and you know that you've paid attention to your own narrative, when you look at other people, you know they have a complex narrative as well. And if you listen to them, and everybody likes to be heard, if you listen to them, then you're in effect being a leader, because you will be able to engage with them, not for them to understand you. You will first seek to understand them, which does a couple of things. I'm listening to you, and they say, oh my gosh, he's listening to me. Maybe I should tell him what he wants to know. And you gain respect and trust in just the simple act of listening, which is a human skill. So I think we're all leaders. It's a question of whether you want to accept the responsibility to lead or not, right? And we can determine that by using a psychometric test, or just having a conversation with somebody, if they want to execute. But I think I want to add one other thing, and I think it goes to something that you said earlier, Leon, and it's all of this is great theory. But if I'm a startup and the VC's giving me $100 million, he's asking me to go fast to get a return on that investment. Kahneman and a lot of other people, Abraham Lincoln, for instance, and it goes back to Plato, have all said the same thing. Sometimes you have to go slow in order to go fast. What we've been talking about for the last hour is how do we go slow to give skills to enable salespeople to accomplish more? Well, we could all do that if the VC wasn't pounding on us to go get the return on their investment. So that's what really the balance is. Not, if we had a clear field, we would just train our salespeople to be better leaders, to have better conversations, to have better relationships with the people that they serve. The VC says, guys, I don't know we have time for that. Go get more dials, get more logos. That's the conundrum, I think, that we have to unpack. Okay. Sorry, guys. So we've got 8 minutes left. Now, I just want to give everybody a chance to say one last point. What advice would you give your customers, your prospects, in regards to this question? So, how can we help the leaders effectively scaling their business with buyer enablement strategies? What advice would you give? One piece of advice. Go on, George. Hit us off.
Yeah,
first.
no, I think as I started saying, I think sellers is about helping and enabling buyers to make a decision and go somewhere they want to go, right? Yeah. I also don't think we should look at sales enablement and buying and enablement as two different separate things. It's the same thing, right? We need sales enablement to do buyer enablement, basically. So those are intertwined and should be. And remember that the tech space makes stuff like this up, right? To sell tech. Someone came up with these names because they want a niche to own, so that they can sell more product. So just stay focused at your ICP. Who can you help better than anyone else and be profitable by doing so? And then train your salespeople to become really good at having those conversations that enable buyers to grow with your help.
Brilliant. Jan?
Yeah, I think it's pretty much about mindset. As George said, train your people to have good conversations, work on their attitude. Second thing is look for the right people. I think, because I think it was a question you asked, Leon, has the role changed? I think more than ever, we need people with a natural curiosity, with EQ and ambition in sales roles. And that's not everyone. Not everyone is capable of having great, good conversations. So, and I think the third thing is very pragmatic. Yeah, for everyone, take out your latest deals, take the perspective of the other person, and just walk yourself through that deal, how you handled it, and think about where could I have made his or her life easier. Yeah. I think that's very easy to start with. Just look at the journey, at the experience you are providing, and how can you make life of buyers easier. Yeah.
Cool. Ineke?
For me, it's all about emotional intelligence, and for me, that's an element that you can train. So training your salespeople to do what only humans can do, connecting to a customer, guiding them, and leading them towards their actual needs. That is something that I would recommend everyone to continue investing in.
Brilliant. Waltraud?
Well, as I'm talking about the VUCA world, I would really recommend to leaders. Yeah, a lot of things have been said, and I made my notes, and it's said already, so I don't have to repeat it. But to add one thing is really to gain the interest of a leader to see this VUCA positive thing and the solutions, and really the value of this VUCA positive thing, which means giving a vision, really creating a framework where understanding and clarity is available and possible or creatable. And by this really allowing, empowering, encouraging, facilitating adaptability and agility. And so VUCA Positive Prime would be a recommendation from my side to leaders.
Brilliant. Arthur?
I would say don't reserve leadership development skills for quote unquote leaders. Cascade it throughout the organization, and especially to your salespeople, because when they show up with leadership skills, they're going to listen better, they will engage more authentically, and they'll be in service to something as opposed to selling something.
Brilliant. My comment would be to the leaders, regardless of what level you're at and regardless of who you've got above you, protect your employees, protect them, provide them with fly cover, protect them, and empower them to be the best that they can be. It doesn't matter what you're getting beaten over the head with in terms of, numbers, KPIs. Forget all of that. You absorb it. Yes, sir. 3 bags full. You tell your team, hey, focus on just quality, being the best, serving your customers, and your customers will help you. They will help you. They will not only close the deal, they will up and cross sell, and they will refer you to more deals. Mm-hmm. Have a customer-centric mindset, and your customers will help you hit those targets. Okay, guys. Thank you very, very much for your time. It was a brilliant, brilliant debate, really, brilliant conversation. Just for the rest of the audience, I'm not sure if all the speakers are going to be here later, but the debate will continue from, from 4:20 to 5 p.m. CET. Where the speakers will be sitting there, and you'll be able to ask them one-to-one questions in a live scenario. So I hope as many of the speakers can be there as possible. I hope as many of the audience can be there as possible. I hope you enjoyed your time. We're going to have a quick 10-minute break, and then we're going to go and see some exhibitors. Thank you very much for your time, guys. Speak soon.
Thank you.
Thank you very much.
Bye-bye.
Bye-bye.